I procrastinated the script for like 3 days because I just kept playing Bastion stairs. That game mode has no right to be that fun. I love form switchers. The ability to play what is effectively 2 characters at once is so engaging to me, especially when you have 2 playstyles that can swap on a dime and also feed into each other. It's just some of the most engaging game design that you will find in nearly any character-based game. The definition of form switcher that I'm going to be using throughout this is a character who has one ability that changes their other abilities, or at least significantly changes how they play or their playstyle. My favorite example would be someone like Rek'Sai from League of Legends, but if we want to stick to the more character shooter type of genres, then you can also take a look at Koga from Paladins, though that one's a little bit of a stretch. Among the styles and mechanics that I have wanted to see in new Overwatch characters, form switchers have always been my #1 desire. Sure, we currently have Ramatra, but I don't really think that counts if I'm going to be honest with you. It doesn't really feel the same. And sure, in Overwatch 1, we used to have Bastion, and he actually filled this niche fairly well, but in Overwatch 2, well, we have a different Bastion now. Nowadays, it's more like Bastion is swapping weapons rather than swapping forms. He's Overwatch's static form switcher, so let's talk about it. Also, I know that I put up a poll saying what video this was going to be, and Genji's the one who actually won it, but Bastion's just a more interesting video to me to make right now, lads. So yeah, look, you have this. And you all know the story by now. History first, game design later, you know what to do. Timestamps in the description. We're not going to spend too long on this history section, but an important thing to know about Bastion is that there has technically been 3 versions of him. Back in the beta, Bastion actually had a shield when in sentry mode and he couldn't turn around. He could look like 90 degrees to the left and the right, and that was it. But anyway, by release, he had changed at least a little bit. His recon mode was practically the same as today, but with some hefty spread on his primary, but sentry mode is where the big differences are. The first version of Bastion planted himself down when he used it. He also didn't have his Ironclad passive for a while. It wasn't until nearly a year later that that was added. And his secondary ability was self-repair, which for some reason when in recon mode made you stand still in order to use it, and in general it would stop working if you took damage. It also had no resource bar, you could just keep on healing. And finally, his ultimate, Configuration Tank, turned Bastion into a tank that shot missiles that just one-shot squishies on directs. It also granted him some bonus armor when he transformed. It was great for movement, using it to jump up to places you could never reach before was amazing. Bastion was in a pretty meh spot for about a year. In 2017, he got some changes, including his Ironclad passive like I mentioned earlier, but also some changes to self-repair, making it actually tolerable to use. Sentry got some number adjustments, but he could no longer headshot, and his ultimate lost its bonus armor on transformation. And that one set of changes from 2017 is where literally everything notable about Bastion in Overwatch 1 ends. He had a total of 8 patches throughout Overwatch 1's lifespan, and all of them were just number shifts, so it's not important for me to be talking about them here. Moving into Overwatch 2, his Ironclad passive got deleted, and recon got a damage increase and a fire rate decrease along with the spread being removed. Self-repair got replaced by Tactical Grenade, and I do have to say I love this thing and its ricochet potential. And of course, the 2 elephants in the room, Sentry being replaced to a cooldown, letting Bastion move around while in it, and Configuration Tank being replaced by Configuration Artillery, a Doomfist ult that you shoot out 3 times. After the beta, his first change was a reintroduction of Ironclad. I have never seen a passive get added and removed so many times in my life. There was also some small number changes at the end of 2022. Artillery got a couple shifts, but the big one was Sentry getting its cooldown lowered from 12 to 10 seconds. And for a couple months, that was it, until eventually Blizzard decided to drop a bombshell of a change, with his turret mode now restoring 50 armor upon use. But after just a month of that, this got reverted and was followed by even more nerfs just later on, with the assault cooldown getting increased back to 12 seconds and the spread being increased by 10%. And since then, Bastion has had no changes whatsoever. So we don't need to talk about beta Bastion, like, at all. I just wanted people to know that this thing existed. But Overwatch 1 Bastion, well, this lad was his own story entirely. In early Overwatch, he was one of the most polarizing characters in the entire cast. In low ranks, he ruined the days of people who just came home from their 9 to 5 who tried to queue up for a couple games of Overwatch. And in high ranks, he ruined the days of people who never went outside and who also tried to queue up for a couple games of Overwatch. But the reasons that these days were always ruined was always different. Low rank players could not deal with a Bastion, especially if this Bastion had the extra feature of one singular Orisa shield protecting him. But in higher ranks, because of how exploitable Bastion was when people actually had hands, well, he was kind of suffering up there, and no one liked to see them on their team. And the higher you went, this was just even more enforced, because no one wanted to build their entire team comp around Bastion, which is where he was typically at his strongest, because, you know, the other players who knew what they were doing could dismantle that within seconds. The classic bunker and pirate comps were his home, but I've already spoken about these in my Orisa video, so there's no point in going too in detail about them here. It can be effectively broken down into this. Bastion was your core damage dealer, Orisa was your core thing protecting him, and then depending on the era of Overwatch, you would have one of three healers. Either a Mercy, an Ana, or a Baptiste. Or all the above, honestly. It really just depends what the hell you're doing. The lot of you would haul ass onto the payload or onto the high ground around the objective you're trying to defend, and just pray to God they don't lock in Sombra and EMP you and ruin your entire game plan. And in lower ranks, it was a struggle for people to counter this without using like 12 ults to try and take you down off wherever the hell you were holding, whether it was the payload or just the high ground on a point. They just did not know what they were doing. But as you climbed higher, like one fire concuss booping even just one individual off wherever the hell they're meant to be, that was nearly enough to just win you the fight. Because of his pub stompy nature, he just kind of got left at the wayside by Blizzard. They couldn't buff him because then the low elo players would start crying, and they couldn't nerf him because then the high elo players could never use him at all. Now, this isn't to say that he was completely absent from higher elo matches. I mean, in 2016 to 2018, names of streamers that you frequently would remember if you played back then was people like Colorblind, even Bastion main in the later half of Overwatch 2. These players got up to those high ranks using Bastion. It's not like he was completely absent or just completely horrendous, but for the vast majority of people, he really was not good, and obviously he's been one-tricked to get up to these spots. The general consensus was just simply that if you're in a higher rank in around 2016 to 2018, you'd just be better off using a different hit scan instead of Bastion. But before we get into that 2019 and some double shield talk, let's look at the two styles of Bastion that you would see played. So you had the one that I've been talking about this entire time, the bunker Bastions, the one to just play with their team, stuffed inside an Orisa shield. One of their healers is just focusing everything onto them, probably increasing their damage. But then there's the high elo Bastions, the crackhead Bastions, the flanking Bastions, the lads I'm just a big tracer, don't worry about me Bastions. That is a real quote from one of my friends who got to fucking GM on Bastion. She was just saying she's a big tracer. Like, that is the level of Bastion we're dealing with here. And this whole playstyle was fully encouraged just thanks to the fact that he had a self-heal. Remember back then we didn't have this self-healing passive over time, whatever, that didn't exist. So Bastion was one of the few characters who could actually heal himself. But these crackhead Bastion players were the absolute best at using his own ultimate. Configuration Tank is one of my favorite ults in the game. Having your most threatening state swap from being completely immobile to one of the most mobile states that you could possibly be in is absolutely insane. I have a really old clip where I was on like attack second point Havana, and I just used Bastion ult to climb up to the little tank things on top of those, and then I just was able to set up on that by myself. It was so stupid, but it was brilliant. I love this ultimate, it's amazing. And if you weren't using it to jump onto high ground, well, this Bastion ult was perfect in some double shield comps, because it let people swap up on a dime how they wanted to play. If you wanted to swap from being, you know, sitting still behind shields being all passive, all you needed was a Lucio boost alongside your Bastion tank, and then all of a sudden you are sprinting in a Mach 7, ruining people's days. And actually, speaking of double shield, well, while the premier DPS combo a lot of people think of when double shield is brought up is Doomfist Reaper, when double shield was first popping up quite a lot, Bastion was a staple pick. I mean, look, who else was going to be breaking shields as quick as he did? Double shield was pretty much the first time Bastion had ever been brought out to the forefront of the meta, though since he wasn't really the problem, or caused, it was grand. I mean, they actually gave him a solid buff in 2020, so it's not like people were crying out for Bastion to be nerfed. And that's really where it ends for him in Overwatch 1. I can't say much else because he just didn't have much going on during the entire thing. But Overwatch 2? Well, 5v5 brought us a reworked Bastion, seeing as bunker comps were effectively eradicated, mainly thanks to shields being taken out back. So Blizzard shifted him around, making him better at playing in a more mobile team environment, except for one aspect that I need to get just a little angry about. What the fuck is this ultimate? In Overwatch 2, they wanted teams to be more spread out, to have people on off angles and flanks, so why change Bastion's ult? You swapped his previous ult, which gave him mobility and the ability to play by himself or with his team, depending on the situation, and instead changed it to an ult that would be better suited to Overwatch 1 and its more tightly packed team fights. That extra player brings a lot more value to a big fuck off explosion. It's literally another target to hit. Artillery is just by far the worst ult in the game. Previously, sure, it was tied with Deadeye, but after the buffs that Cassidy just got, not only is it high noon, but it's fucking speedy noon. Artillery is just absolutely terrible. I don't know what they were going for with it. Typically, you could use it just for picks before a team fight starts, but it's so inconsistent at getting them thanks to the variety of ways that characters can either escape or be saved from it. It's essentially just a small bit of chip damage before the fight actually begins. And even then, it's going to get healed up immediately. I don't get why they didn't just keep the tank form, it's nearly better in every way. So while I absolutely hate Bastion's new ultimate, I am happy to say that Grenade has become one of my favourite abilities in the game. I love abilities with multiple uses. Getting a choice out of some utility or damage is one of my favourite ways that abilities can be designed. The ricochet is one of my favourite aspects as well. I love bouncing this thing on a wall to hit an enemy out of my line of sight. So while his ult wasn't a good change and I personally love the grenade, let's look at the turret mode, because oh good god, this is the big one. So earlier on I said that this new version of Bastion is closer to someone swapping weapons rather than swapping forms. And the main reason for this is simply the fact that the majority of form switchers can swap at will. Each form has no time limit, they just swap whenever. Now this isn't true in every single case, just the majority. And it was how the old Bastion worked as well. Obviously, if you're going to have Bastion moving around in his turret form, you can't have that be permanent unless a lot of other concessions are made, whatever they may be. But I will say that Bastion, having his highest threat level locked behind a cooldown, has several side effects. Obviously the main one is that you can put more power into this form, which is great and all, but that also means that when this ability is off cooldown, you become the biggest target on the map. Bastion is extremely punishing to play now, because if even one thing goes wrong when you swap forms, you're dead. Enemy team disengages when you swap, death. Not in the best position after swapping, death. Use form earlier and now you're caught with it still on cooldown, death. The one saving grace for some of these problems is grenade, helping you reposition. But since Bastion takes up to 50 damage from using that grenade on himself, you nearly get punished even more whether you're using it to escape or engage. In lower elos, these punish windows go unnoticed, but once you get past certain ranks, one bad transformation loses you a team fight. It's not like before, where a playstyle shift would allow you to succeed in higher elos. His previous weakness was coordinated players could dismantle a pirate ship, except he had options outside of being his team's core. Bastion could play for himself. But now, you can't play as much of a lone wolf as you did before because you're missing that self-heal. You need to play with your team more, which just makes it easier for coordinated players, since instead of having to break apart a team comp, they literally just have to notice when you push one button. Now, there was one moment in time where all these weaknesses were pretty much alleviated entirely, and that was August 2023, when Bastion would gain armor whenever he swapped modes. This was also coupled with his reconfigure cooldown being turned down to only 10 seconds, and quite simply, he was broken. He became an absolute must pick for about a month before Blizzard eventually slammed the nerf hammer down on him. And Blizzard took Bastion being broken for about a month really personally, it seems, because the next 3 patches he was featured in were all massive nerfs. I already discussed what these nerfs were, but you know, losing damage on direct hits on the grenade just nerfs the high elo players who were actually landing those direct hits, not the low elo players who were missing them all the time. And then even doing stuff like increasing the cooldown on it, getting rid of the 50 armor, like, he was already in, basically a worse state than before, and then to top it all off, they increase his spread when he is transformed. He was just left in a worse state than he was in before, and now he's not been touched since. This poor man got buffed, nerfed into oblivion, and then forgotten about. It could have been left with just some of those nerfs, and it would have left him as a nice, solid, strong pick, and instead they just said to, take him out back, put him on his own grave. And you know something about these changes? Let's take a look at what Bastion's main job typically is. He's usually supposed to be a tank buster. That's what everything in his design leads to. He's meant to be someone who's good at busting tanks. And there's 2 big issues with tank busters as characters. Now the first one is a little bit more of just my own opinion. And it's the fact that tank busters can't be allowed to exist, at least in a strong capacity, in Overwatch 2. We only have one tank. It's 5v5 now. If you have a character who's good at absolutely destroying a tank, well, what's going to happen now? They're going to be broken because they're killing the tank every single team fight, and we all know if you lose your tank first, there's like 9 times out of 10 you're losing that fight just immediately, no questions asked. Then there's also just the fact that in general, tanks are very powerful and hard to kill nowadays. No one DPS should be able to completely take them on, which is what a tank buster is supposed to do. A tank buster should be able to completely 1v1 a tank, but if they're allowed to do that, then they're just going to be way too strong. And in Bastion's case, well, he just fails as a tank buster now. He's got about one good matchup into the entire tank roster, and it's Winston. If you're playing against a good Reinhardt, a diva who knows what defense matrix is, a Mauga who exists, you just lose the tank matchup. You're not winning that duel. Like, while playing to get footage for this video, I was against a good few Maugas. That was some of the worst, just the worst possible experience, because a mix of cardiac overdrive and his armor, I was tickling this man. He did not feel a thing. So not only does Bastion not really live up to his form switching identity anymore, he doesn't even live up to his primary design principle of destroying tanks anymore. So he can take on tanks, but he used to have some solid burst and pick potential on squishies, except that got disfenestrated once the HP changes came in. A direct grenade and 2 headshots in recon could insta-kill 200 HP heroes previously, but now you need 4 headshots, which just is not realistic for a burst combo. Not only is there plenty of time to react to that damage, but the grenade nerfs made it even weaker. His best style now is taking off angles, using the grenade for mobility, and trying to get a quick meltdown on squishies in turret form. You can't reliably get picks with your ult, you can't use grenade and recon mode combined to try and get a little pick on the side. All you have left is one ability with a mountain's worth of counterplay. A mild exaggeration, because realistically, if you get into some kind of flank position, you're going to melt down a soldier or something, but again, if you're also into something like Kiriko, I wish you luck. While I love Bastion, and I will stand by the fact that drugs are worthless when you can just play Bastion with a Kiriko ult, he is also one of the worst feeling DPS to play right now. I mean, a downright horrendous ultimate, a grenade that while is really cool, is also incredibly backwards in its design, and for 8 seconds you can become one of the most threatening characters in the game, so long as they don't sprint, dash, recall, roll, shotgun, deflect, lunge, mine, ice block, ice wall, concuss, teleport, turn into miss, slide, teleport again, twice, grappling hook, hit the ground, defense matrix, power block, just walk away with some bonus health, exist, fortify, spin a javelin, enter a stance, shield, huff petrol, use a kinetic grasp, grapple again, use bubbles, sleep him, bash, outburst, Suzu, literally anyone, dash and grip anyone away, speed the entire team away, fly away, fade or just turn into God. Only a few things that can be done. I mean, like, you'll be fine, right? Yeah, look, that's just a bit, I'm not being serious with all that. That was... I just saw a chance to make a good joke. He does feel pretty bad to play either way though. No matter what way you slice it, it's just really, it is suffering to try and play Bastion right now. And while I tend to shy away from making stuff like suggested changes that I would like to see for a character in videos like these, especially if they're not one of my primary mains, look, you know what, lads? I really want to see some changes for Bastion, even if what I'm about to suggest is a little extreme and the odds are low. And first, just bring back the tank ult. Just bring back the tank ult. Get rid of artillery. Get artillery out. Please bring back the tank ult. If that was the only change he got and he was never touched again, I would honestly be happy. That would be more than enough if we're being fully honest here. But if Blizzard were to grant me the privilege of just fully reworking him, well, what I would also do is bring back Sentry Mode, and I mean the old Overwatch 1 Sentry Mode. And I know there's an issue with this, making it the old one where he can't move. Players are more spread out in Overwatch now. This isn't going to be like the best thing for him. He's not going to be able to take on people as often as he could have. Well, that is where one thing critical is not changing, and it's that we're keeping the grenade. I want Bastion to be able to use his grenade while in this form. So sure, he's not able to move immediately, but one, he can set up whenever he needs to use his sentry mode, so he's always threatening, and two, I just think it would be funny to see a stationary Bastion fly through the air. That just looks like it would be funny to me. And I suppose I should mention, yeah, we're keeping the grenade. I would honestly say to increase the impact damage and maybe lower the explosion damage, just so, you know, people who can aim are actually going to be doing well. But the main thing I'd really want is just for that self-damage that he does whenever he tries to use it on himself gets lowered. I don't know by how much, I don't know what the number could perfectly be. Something like 20 or 30 max I think would be a lot more reasonable than 50, because when he's got 50 right now, that nearly brings him to an effective 300 health if you use it from full HP. Some may want self-repair to make a return, but I think with the change that I've made, self-repair could be a little over the top, but I can definitely see it working depending on the suggestion that some of you could bring to me. So if there's any change to Bastion that you would like to see, if you have any thoughts on the changes that I just brought up there, anything of that sort, let me know. I want to see what other people's takes are. While I don't play him as much as I play other DPS characters, Bastion is certainly one of my favorites. If anything, he's probably my favorite hit scan out of the entire roster of characters in this game. Like, sure, Ana's brilliant, but Bastion's funnier. His form switching was always something that I absolutely adored in Overwatch 1, and seeing it go in Overwatch 2 wasn't something that I wanted at all. At least his rework gave us the grenade though, because this thing is seriously fun. As much shit as I have given it, I do love this grenade. It's really good. And I should say, Herluf and Playto, thank the two of ye for helping me make this script and all that. You gave me suggestions on stuff like the Bastion changes and whatever. All that, you were both massive helps. You really helped me put my thoughts in order and give me a few extra bits that I didn't actually know about to begin with. So I'm going to be leaving a link to both their Twitch streams, their Twitters, all that in the description, so please give them a look, they deserve it. And that's me done for today. So tell me yourselves, what did you think of Bastion? Whether it's Overwatch 1 or the Overwatch 2 one, I want to hear it. And for my usual self-promotion, well, I've got a Twitch, Twitter, Discord, all that in the description, so you know where to go if you want to stop by. And if you're still here, go on, drop a like, a sub, all that YouTube stuff, and I'll talk to you next time, lads.